In 1999, Joe Hines, the district attorney of Brooklyn, decided that there should be an alternative to incarceration for women who are looking at going to prison for drug-related or felony-type crimes. But if they had children, because we had just had an evaluation done of our DTAP, which is our drug treatment program, which said that it was the best drug treatment program in the country. But there were two factors that stood out. That it didn't fare as well with women, and why? It didn't fare well with women because for women, they had children, and they didn't want to stay in the drug treatment. They wanted to get out to be with their kids. And the second thing is that most drug treatment programs back then were for men. So what was missing was, as Tisa said, that relational aspect of it that women need so much. So when my colleague and I met with the DA and told him of some cases of women and their children, he basically said to us, go out and try to figure out how to do this. Well, we looked at each other, and I'll be honest with you. I mean, when we walked out that door, I thought, well, we'll just say that we're going to send them to a place that was set up for women and children. And what we found out is what you all know. There was no such place. I mean, there are such places, supportive housing places for women who are coming out of prison. There are places like that for homeless women, but there really were no places in which you could find an ATI for women and their children. And why? Well, because there were really no prosecutors in the entire country who were willing to do that. And so when this DA says, I want to do that, well, it meant we had to create that. So what we basically did, we started to look up, well, who is in this type of work? And so I met Joan Mundback from Palladia. I met Ann Jacobs from WPA. I met with Corporation for Supportive Housing. I met with, I think there are people in this audience that I met 13 years ago. And then we also met with all, and I mean this, all the legislators in New York State, in Brooklyn, and everyone thought this was a brilliant idea. Why, of course, we should have a place for women to go who have children, because it is not a good thing to separate the children from the mother. Well, that's what they said, but that's not what they thought. Because what really became apparent to me was that they didn't think the women deserved these children. And we still hear it now. But one thing that was clear to me is that maybe the women might not deserve these children, but the children deserve their mothers. And so that became the focus of what we started to look for, is that by letting this go on, where women are going to prison for minor offenses and children are being separated from them, I mean, you might think that, oh, well, she's a drug addict, she did this, why do we want the kids to see that? Well, the truth is, you know what the kids want? And you know what? I saw this at Ann Jacobs' place. I saw it when I visited her place, and I forget the name of the house, the Huntington House, how children in the Huntington House who had been separated from their mothers, all they wanted was their mothers to get better. They wanted the mothers to get help. So we started to focus on, let's look at it from the point of view of the children. Because maybe then the legislators would be more open to helping. And when we would meet with Ann at Palladia, she and her organization were so generous to us. They took us everywhere. They took us to OASIS, the Corporation for Supportive Housing. They did everything they possibly do. We would sit and try to figure out, how are we going to get this money? We even started a board with a law firm, Cravath, Swaine and Moore. We had some of the most influential, wealthiest people who basically told us, you don't know what you're doing and you'll never raise money on your own, we'll do it. Well, they didn't do it. And that board broke up. I think that someday when I retire, I'm going to write a book about this. But during that, I met the most wonderful men and women in this field. People from ACS, people from, who were all really trying to do the same thing. But what struck me, and it really just happened to me the other night when I was going over materials and reading, how, I'm going to show you like some of the stats about children. It is so clear that we know that the trauma a child goes through when he is separated from a parent, and the parent goes to jail, does incredible damage to that child. We recognize that in every part of their life, their schoolwork, whatever it is, bad things happen. And what struck me is that the next page talked about how we could, well, maybe we should, when they visit the prison, make it a child-friendly place. Well, how the hell can a prison be a child-friendly place? Maybe when the child comes, we could, figure out how to let them in, even though they don't have the right card to get in, or something. And maybe because I was naive, and I was, and here I am, a prosecutor, not getting it, thinking, why can't we have places for women and children to go to that's not prison, So we looked around the country. We saw that out in California, they had community corrections, but they were still in prison. We saw that in some places they would allow mothers to bring, they had 2 children, one was 6, one was 7. You only could bring the 6-year-old. So what do you tell the 7-year-old? Then you had other places that took women in but provided no services, no counseling, nothing for the child or for the mother. And then we even looked, I tried to get a grant to go to Scandinavia, because Scandinavia has some very, very interesting programs, in one program they had, it was interesting, in Norway they ran out of space and they sent women to a nursing home. And what they found was when the women were in the nursing home, they got, and they left, they didn't recidivate. So something happened in that nursing home. They had the women engaged in work that helped them and made them feel like individuals. And I always thought, wow, maybe in one of our buildings we could have a nursing home and do something. Because let me tell you, along the way, and I think Joan knows this, we had many schemes and many different buildings and many different groups we worked with, and we had more blueprints, right, and architects to do this. So finally, as I said, in 1999, we were given this job. In 2008, all those years we were working, I called up Joan Montback and said, Joan, here we go. When we met with you first, we had all of these rules. We want a house that accepts every child, every age, every this. And I could see that Jane Velez would say, oh, I don't know, I don't think we can do all of that. If you could just find someone or help us to just get a house, and then we can do the rest. So at that time, Joan said, well, there's Rita Zimmer. And Rita Zimmer came to our office, met with us, sat in the chair, and said, well, I have housing solutions out in Brooklyn, and it is permanent housing funded by HUD. Maybe the next house, it can be yours. Well, we jumped off that chair and ran to the DA, so I'm going to show you what became ours. September 2008, the Regina Drew House opened its doors to its first resident. Okay, an estimated 1.6 million children have mothers under some form of correctional supervision, including 294,000 children whose mothers are incarcerated in state prisons or local jails. When a woman goes to prison, it is her children who suffer the most. All right, the Bureau of Justice Statistics. The number of mothers in prison increased by 122% since 1991. The number of incarcerated fathers increased by 77% during the same period. Women were more likely than men to live with their children, be the primary caregiver, and be the head of a single-parent household prior to incarceration. 77% of incarcerated mothers, nearly 3 times the number of fathers, reported providing most of the daily care for their children. 11% of incarcerated mothers reported their children being placed in foster care compared to only 2% fathers. These children are at greater risk of being neglected, getting lost in the foster care system, and committing crimes. Prison's toll on children, I think you know this: anger, feelings of abandonment, alienation, overall dysfunction, hostility to authority. Far less likely than their peers to succeed in school, more likely to be truant, at high risk for drug abuse, gang involvement, sexual misconduct, and delinquency. One of the things that I was beginning to notice, we were hearing about all of these cases of young people bringing guns to school and doing all of this. And in every case, we looked and saw that they had an issue with an absent mother. And in this case, the boy brought a gun and held the teacher at gunpoint. And they found out that he pulled the gun because he wanted to join his mother in jail. And during the process of deciding how to create a Drew House, we had a panel of young people and asked them, if you had a Drew House, if you had a place that you could go with your mother, we had some 14 and 15-year-old boys, would you go? And unanimously, of course we would. Yes, they wanted to be with their mothers. And they described to us at that time how some of them tried to get in trouble because they perceived that the only way to see their mothers would be to be arrested. So this is the Drew House model, which exists today. It's a 6-family house with 6 separate apartments. Has capacity for 5 defendants and their children. A house manager is in residence. A case manager on site. Individualized service plans. Services provided through linkages to mothers and their children. Thus far, a total of 11 women have been or currently are in residence at Drew House. 9 women have successfully completed their mandates. 6 of these women are employed. 2 of those women plan to marry the fathers of their children. 26 children have been served by the Drew House. You hear the cost benefits of the Drew House, And this last month, the DA was recognized as an innovator, and I'm happy to say that when he heard about Georgia Lerner's and WPA's Justice Home, he jumped on to want to be part of that. The other thing is that before I got here, Rita Zimmer, who runs Housing Solutions and is the person who oversees the Drew House, she sent me a list of success stories about the children. I have worked with students in high school and elementary school for 23 years before I became an attorney. In the DA's office, because of this program and because we work with so many children who have been disenfranchised, we've created a school for kids who have been left back and truant, and the kids are doing well. Well, in the Drew House, they come into the Drew House doing very poorly in school, and the longer they're in the Drew House and they're with the mothers, they start to do well in school. Right, Rita? And they begin to, begin to feel more stable, safer, more secure. And as a matter of fact, this summer, we are hiring one of the children of one of the women who finished her mandate. She'll be working in the DA's office as an intern. She is 16 years of age, and she'll be a high school intern. And we hope to do that. And so that is the story of the Drew House. And if you have any questions later,